If you're over 60, what if I told you that something you trust every single morning, something as small and seemingly harmless as a vitamin, could be quietly harming the very thing that's kept you alive all these years? Your heart? I know that sounds dramatic, maybe even a little unsettling. But after spending decades working with older adults, listening to their stories, studying their health patterns, and treating their emergencies, I can no longer stay silent. This isn't about fear, it's about truth. It's about protecting the one organ that never gets a break, the one that beats 100,000 times a day and asks for nothing in return. I've seen it too many times. Seniors with the best intentions, carefully taking handfuls of supplements every morning, believing they're doing the right thing, only to walk into my clinic weeks later with symptoms they can't explain. Irregular heartbeats, dizziness, chest tightness, or worse. And often the culprit isn't age, stress, or bad luck. It's 5 specific vitamins that are marketed as safe, natural, even essential for people their age. But what no one tells them, what no label ever admits, is that these common supplements can silently thin their blood, clog their arteries, disrupt their heart rhythm, or cause hidden toxicity that builds up over time. This video isn't just a warning, it's a guide, a roadmap to help you understand which vitamins to stop taking immediately and what to do instead to truly support your heart as you age. We're going to dive into each of these 5 silent offenders, expose the real science behind them, and reveal the alternatives that actually help, not harm, your heart. Along the way, you'll hear the story of Harold, a 78-year-old man who almost lost everything to a well-meaning daily habit. And by the end of this video, I promise you'll see your supplement shelf with brand new eyes, not with fear, but with wisdom. Because your next 10, 20, even 30 years depend on the choices you start making today. So don't blink, don't skip, because what you're about to learn could be the most important lesson your heart has been waiting to hear. First, the dangerous illusion of high-dose vitamin E. Vitamin E has long been marketed as a miracle compound, an anti-aging shield, a brain protector, a heart ally. It's printed on supplement bottles in bold letters, praised in glossy health magazines, and recommended in countless senior vitality guides. For many older adults, it's almost a default inclusion in their morning routine. The logic seems sound. It's an antioxidant, right? It fights free radicals, right? So more must be better, especially as the body ages. But here lies the trap. While vitamin E in modest food-based amounts is indeed beneficial, the high doses found in many supplements, often 400 to 800 IU or more, can quietly shift from helpful to harmful, especially for the aging heart. After the age of 60, the body's internal balance becomes far more sensitive. Metabolism slows, blood vessels become more delicate, and medications begin to interact in complex ways. When you add a large daily dose of vitamin E into this mix, you're not just supporting your heart, you might be pushing it closer to danger. One of the most overlooked effects of high-dose vitamin E is its ability to thin the blood. While this might sound beneficial to those worried about clots or strokes, for older adults already on aspirin, blood pressure medication, or statins, this thinning effect can spiral into risk. It may increase the chances of internal bleeding, lead to dangerous drops in clotting ability, or even raise the risk of hemorrhagic stroke. The worst part? You won't feel it happening. There's no warning label from your body, no twinge, no rush of pain, just silence until the day something goes wrong. What makes this even more troubling is that the signs of vitamin E overdose often mimic the common discomforts of aging. Fatigue, light bruising, a fluttering heartbeat here and there. Most seniors chalk it up to just getting old. They don't question the pill. In fact, they think it's helping. But inside, that daily dose is altering how the blood flows, how the heart beats, and how the body responds under pressure. All of this could be avoided with a simpler, safer approach. Food. The vitamin E found in almonds, sunflower seeds, spinach, and avocados is more than enough for most older adults. These sources deliver vitamin E in harmony with other nutrients, in a form the body knows exactly how to use. Nature never intended this vitamin to be swallowed in concentrated doses, isolated from the context of a meal, and stacked on top of a dozen other supplements. Yet that's what many older adults are encouraged to do. Why? Because it's profitable. It's easier to sell a capsule than a lifestyle. Supplement companies rarely mention that the body only needs a small amount of vitamin E, because if they did, how would they sell megadose formulas labeled anti-aging defense or heart strength? The truth is, the needs of a 30-year-old cannot be projected onto someone in their 60s, 70s, or 80s. The aging body is not a battleground in need of more ammunition. It's a finely balanced system that requires gentleness, nuance, and precision. And finally, reflect on this. Your heart has carried you through every moment of your life. It has endured every loss, every joy, every stress. It deserves more than blind faith in a pill. It deserves awareness. It deserves respect. And it deserves choices that honor its strength, not gamble with it. The first step to protecting it may be as simple as this. Reconsider what you've been taught to trust. If you liked what we shared in the first part, comment with the number 1 below. If you're still unsure or disagree, comment with the number 0 and tell us why. We're here to listen, and we'll do our best to give you thoughtful answers tailored to your situation. And before we move forward, let me gently remind you, if even one idea in this video has sparked a thought, eased a worry, or made you feel a little more seen, there's still so much more ahead. If this journey resonates with you, please take a moment to click the subscribe button. It means the world to us and helps this wisdom reach more hearts who truly need it. And I'd love to hear from you. What part of this message speaks to your own experience? Drop a comment below and let us learn from each other, because here, every voice matters. Second, calcium without vitamin K2, building bones while breaking arteries. We've been told for years that calcium is the golden key to strong bones, and for seniors especially, that message has been loud, persistent, and rarely questioned. Take your calcium, they say, or risk fractures, falls, and the loss of independence. So every morning, millions of older adults swallow chalky white pills, believing they're fortifying their skeleton and shielding themselves from the frailty of age. But what few people realize, what even some doctors overlook, is that calcium, when taken alone and without proper companions, doesn't always go where it's needed. Instead of strengthening your bones, it may be hardening your arteries. This is the part the supplement industry won't tell you. Calcium, while essential, doesn't have a built-in GPS. It doesn't automatically know to go to your hips or spine. It needs direction. Without guidance, excess calcium can circulate aimlessly through your bloodstream, settling into the walls of arteries, joints, and soft tissues. Over time, this creates a hidden but deadly process: arterial calcification. Your arteries slowly become stiff, less elastic, and more prone to cracks and pressure surges. Here's where vitamin K2 enters the picture, and why it's such a vital but often missing piece of the puzzle. K2 acts as a biological traffic officer. It tells calcium, "You don't belong here," and redirects it toward your bones where it's needed most. It activates a specific protein called osteocalcin, which helps bind calcium to your skeletal structure, and another called matrix GLA protein, which prevents calcium from accumulating in blood vessels. Without vitamin K2, calcium is like a builder working without blueprints, well-intentioned but misdirected. And yet, how many calcium supplements on pharmacy shelves actually contain K2? Very few. Most formulations focus solely on calcium and maybe vitamin D, but vitamin D alone only enhances calcium absorption. It doesn't control where it ends up. In fact, taking calcium and vitamin D without K2 may actually increase your risk of vascular calcification. The tragedy is that this risk builds quietly. No pain, no warning, just a gradual stiffening that raises your blood pressure, burdens your heart, and increases your long-term risk of stroke and heart failure, all while you believed you were doing the right thing. What's more, many seniors who take these supplements don't actually have a calcium deficiency. They eat dairy, they consume leafy greens, they take multivitamins, They're getting calcium from multiple sources without even realizing it. And without enough K2 to guide that calcium, they're slowly turning their cardiovascular system into a battlefield. So what's the solution? First, focus on food-based calcium. Yogurt, sardines, tofu, kale, and broccoli contain bioavailable calcium in the presence of other helpful nutrients. These whole foods provide what your body needs in a balanced, controlled form. Second, if you must supplement calcium, choose a formula that includes K2 and magnesium. Magnesium helps balance calcium's effects and keeps the heart's rhythm stable, while K2 ensures calcium is used where it's needed, not where it's harmful. And most importantly, never add calcium to your daily routine without first reviewing your full intake. What seems like a helpful addition may actually be an unnecessary overload. Remember this: true strength doesn't come from piling on pills. It comes from understanding how each one affects the whole. If you've been relying on calcium to protect your future, take a moment to ask whether you've been giving it the partners it needs. Because no single nutrient works alone, and your heart, perhaps more than any other part of you, depends on the truth. If you liked what we shared in the second part, comment with the number 2 below. If you're still unsure or disagree, comment with the number 0 and tell us why. We're here to listen, and we'll do our best to give you thoughtful answers tailored to your situation. Third, iron supplements when you don't need them. A silent rust inside the heart. Iron sounds essential because it is. It's the mineral responsible for carrying oxygen through your blood, fueling your energy, and supporting your immune system. So when older adults begin feeling tired, sluggish, or foggy, many of them instinctively assume they must be iron deficient. Without a second thought, they reach for a supplement. Better safe than sorry, they think. But in the case of iron, that logic couldn't be further from the truth. Because if your body doesn't need extra iron, taking it anyway may do more harm than good, especially to your heart. Unlike some nutrients, iron has no built-in exit strategy. Once it enters your system, there's no easy way for the body to flush out the excess. It accumulates, quietly and gradually. At first, the damage is invisible, but over time, excess iron becomes toxic. It settles into your organs like rust on machinery, silent but corrosive. The liver is one of its first victims, but the heart isn't far behind. As iron builds up in cardiac tissue, it begins to weaken the muscle, disrupt the electrical impulses that keep your rhythm steady, and increase the risk of heart failure. This isn't speculation. It's a well-documented phenomenon known as iron overload. And it happens more often than you think in older adults who never needed extra iron to begin with. The most insidious part? The symptoms of iron overload often mirror the signs of aging itself. Fatigue, joint aches, memory lapses, even mild depression. So instead of seeing the iron as the problem, many people double down, adding even more, hoping to feel better. What they don't realize is that the very substance they believe is helping them may be accelerating the wear and tear on their heart, brain, and bones. The mistake often starts with multivitamins. Many senior formulas still include iron, even though the majority of older adults no longer menstruate, rarely lose blood, and typically don't require additional iron unless specifically diagnosed with anemia. Others start taking standalone iron pills just because they feel tired. But tiredness isn't a diagnosis. It's a symptom with dozens of possible causes, from sleep deprivation to thyroid issues to dehydration. Taking iron without confirming a deficiency is like pouring oil into an engine without checking the dipstick. It may cause more problems than it solves. So how can you protect yourself? The answer is simple. Test, don't guess. Before you take even a single iron pill, ask your doctor for a ferritin or serum iron test. Know your levels, understand your needs, and never ever assume that more iron is a harmless boost. For many older adults, it's an invisible toxin in disguise. If you do need more iron, focus on food-based sources first. Lentils, spinach, liver, pumpkin seeds, and fortified cereals, because the body regulates absorption from food much more efficiently than from pills. And if a supplement is truly necessary, it should always be prescribed, monitored, and reviewed regularly. This isn't about fear, it's about precision. It's about understanding that the aging body is not a playground for guesswork. It's a finely tuned instrument that demands respect. Your heart, more than any other organ, suffers in silence. It doesn't complain until it's overwhelmed. So don't wait for palpitations or breathlessness to act. Iron is not just a nutrient, it's a metal. And like any metal left unchecked, it can corrode from the inside out. If you liked what we shared in the third part, comment with the number 3 below. If you're still unsure or disagree, comment with the number 0 and tell us why. We're here to listen, and we'll do our best to give you thoughtful answers tailored to your situation. Fourth, vitamin B6 in excess, when too much of a good thing turns dangerous. Vitamin B6 is often wrapped in comforting language. It's called the mood vitamin, the brain booster, the natural sleep aid. It's present in energy supplements, memory-enhancing formulas, and even those colorful little bottles that promise to keep your mind sharp as you age. With its glowing reputation, it's no surprise that countless seniors include it in their daily regimen, believing it will help them think better, sleep deeper, and feel more energized. But what most people don't know, what marketing rarely admits, is that vitamin B6, when taken in excess, doesn't just stop helping. It starts hurting, slowly, quietly, and dangerously. The problem lies not in B6 itself, but in the illusion that more is always better. Unlike water-soluble vitamins that exit the body easily, B6 behaves differently in older adults. It can accumulate in the bloodstream over time, especially when taken through high-dose supplements, sometimes exceeding 500% or even 1,000% of the recommended daily intake. This chronic overload doesn't announce itself with sudden symptoms. It creeps in. It starts with a slight numbness in the fingers or toes, maybe a bit of tingling, a sense of imbalance that's easy to dismiss as age. But underneath those small changes, something serious is unfolding. Excess vitamin B6 begins to damage the protective sheath surrounding your nerves, a condition known as peripheral neuropathy. The result is a gradual breakdown in communication between your brain and your body. Coordination falters. Reflexes slow. Your legs may feel weak. Your hands may feel clumsy. Some seniors find themselves tripping more often, dropping utensils, or feeling as though their limbs are no longer listening. These aren't signs of natural aging. They're signs of toxicity, but because they develop slowly, they're often misattributed to just getting older. So what should you do instead? The safest approach is to rely on food-based sources. Bananas, chickpeas, oatmeal, poultry, and potatoes all provide B6 in balanced amounts, along with the other nutrients your body needs to metabolize it properly. If supplementation is necessary, it should be done cautiously, with blood levels monitored and doses kept well below the tolerable upper limit, especially in older adults whose kidneys may not filter as efficiently as they once did. The core message here is simple but powerful. More is not better, especially when it comes to vitamins that affect your nervous system and your heart. The promise of sharper thinking or deeper sleep should never come at the cost of long-term damage. Supplements should enhance your life, not quietly erode it. So take a moment to check your labels. Look for the hidden B6 in your pills, your powders, and even your healthy drinks. And ask yourself this: am I nourishing my body or overwhelming it? If you liked what we shared in the fourth part, comment with the number 4 below. If you're still unsure or disagree, comment with the number 0 and tell us why. We're here to listen, and we'll do our best to give you thoughtful answers tailored to your situation. Fifth, heart health multivitamins. When the label lies and your heart pays the price, walk into any pharmacy or grocery store, and you'll be greeted by a wall of brightly colored boxes. They wear comforting names like Heart Support, 50+ Essentials, or Senior Vitality Blend. Some even feature a cheerful senior couple smiling in a field of wildflowers, as if longevity and happiness came sealed in a plastic bottle. For many older adults, these multivitamins feel like a simple insurance policy. A little bit of everything to cover all the bases, to make up for what might be missing in their diet, to feel proactive and in control. But behind the glittering promises and wellness buzzwords lies a more complicated and often dangerous truth. These so-called heart health multivitamins are frequently packed with unnecessary, excessive, or poorly understood ingredients that may do more harm than good, especially for aging bodies. The first danger hides in quantity. Many of these supplements contain megadoses of vitamins far beyond what the body actually needs. And while that may sound generous, even helpful, the reality is that the older body is more sensitive, not less. Your liver doesn't process things as quickly. Your kidneys aren't as efficient at clearing out waste. Your heart doesn't bounce back as easily from stress. So when you flood the system with high concentrations of niacin, vitamin A, or synthetic B-complex compounds, you're not boosting your body, you're burdening it. But perhaps the most misleading part of these multivitamins isn't what they contain, it's what they claim. Phrases like doctor recommended, clinically supported, or formulated for seniors are often more about marketing than medical consensus. These products are designed to sound reassuring, but rarely are they tailored to the specific, individualized needs of your body. They promise protection, clarity, energy, but deliver confusion, overload, and in some cases, cardiovascular strain. So how do you protect yourself? First, question everything. Just because it's sold over the counter doesn't mean it's safe for you. Read the labels. Investigate each ingredient. Look for dosages that exceed 100% of the daily recommended value and ask, why is this necessary? Second, avoid multivitamins that hide behind proprietary blends or use language that sounds vague and exaggerated. You have the right to know exactly what you're putting into your body. Remember, your heart doesn't need a flashy bottle. It doesn't need trendy herbs or megadoses of synthetic compounds. It needs peace. It needs rhythm. It needs consistency. And above all, it needs you to look past the label and into the truth. If you liked what we shared in the fifth part, comment with the number 5 below. If you're still unsure or disagree, comment with the number 0 and tell us why. We're here to listen, and we'll do our best to give you thoughtful answers tailored to your situation. Sixth, what vitamins should you actually take? The quiet heroes your heart truly needs. Let's start with vitamin D3. This is one of the few supplements that nearly every senior can benefit from, especially those who spend a lot of time indoors, live in colder climates, or avoid sun exposure. Vitamin D plays a critical role in regulating blood pressure, supporting bone density, boosting immune function, and yes, helping the heart maintain a healthy rhythm. Unlike the trendy, overhyped supplements that come and go, vitamin D3 has consistently shown long-term benefits when taken at safe levels, guided by blood tests. Next is magnesium, often overlooked yet quietly essential. Magnesium helps maintain a steady heartbeat, calms the nervous system, aids muscle relaxation, and improves sleep quality. It also helps balance calcium in the body, which, as we discussed earlier, is crucial for preventing arterial calcification. If your heart feels jumpy, your sleep restless, or your muscles tense, this mineral may be what your body is quietly craving. And finally, omega-3 fatty acids, particularly those derived from fish oil or flaxseed. Omega-3s are anti-inflammatory powerhouses. They reduce blood clotting tendencies, improve circulation, lower triglycerides, and even help stabilize mood. Your brain and your heart both depend on these fats to maintain membrane integrity and smooth communication between cells. Unlike stimulant-heavy formulas or artificial blends, omega-3s work slowly and steadily, like water smoothing a stone over time. But here's the most important truth of all. No supplement, no matter how pure or clinically backed, will ever be more powerful than your daily habits. A pill can support healing, but it can't replace movement. A capsule can assist your heart, but it can't make up for stress, loneliness, poor sleep, or processed food. The real foundation of health after 60 and beyond is built on 5 pillars: nourishment, movement, rest, connection, and awareness. If you liked what we shared in the 6th part, comment with the number 6 below. If you're still unsure or disagree, comment with the number 0 and tell us why. We're here to listen, and we'll do our best to give you thoughtful answers tailored to your situation. Your heart has carried you through every season of life, without pause, without complaint. Even when you made choices that unknowingly worked against it, it kept beating. Today, maybe for the first time, you've paused to ask, am I really helping it, or just following habits I never questioned? This video wasn't meant to scare you, it was meant to awaken you, because it's not too late to make better choices, not at 60, not at 70, not ever. You don't need a shelf full of pills. You need clarity, simplicity, and the courage to ask, what does my heart truly need right now? So before the day ends, take one step. Check your supplements. Talk to your doctor. Choose with intention. Your heart has been there for you every day. Now it's your turn to be there for it. And if this message spoke to you, leave a comment below. Let others know they're not alone on this journey. Your wisdom could be someone else's turning point. If this video spoke to you in any way, if it helped you understand your body a little better, or made you feel just a bit more hopeful about aging well, then I'd love for you to join this growing community. Please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone you care about. You never know who might need these words today. And most importantly, I want to hear from you. What part of this video resonated most with you? Leave a comment below. I read everyone, and your story might just inspire someone else. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of Daily Elder Advice. Until next time, stay well, stay wise, and sleep peacefully.